Okay, we are recording. I'm going to give it 10 seconds so that sound doesn't cut off. Here we go. Friends, welcome back. We are very lucky to be joined by one of my favorite and most informative guests, HG Tudor. And this is the fourth interview that we've done. So I'm going to leave a link in the description box as well as the pinned comment for the other 3 interviews that we did, because we're going to be picking it up from there. We've covered quite a bit of info on the previous interviews. HG, how are you doing, my man?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for asking, Doug, and pleasure to be back again. I always enjoy our conversation, so looking forward to our discussion today. And I know many of my listeners are as well. They always praise the interaction between you and I, so awesome. They'll be looking forward to listening to this.
Thank you, man. And HG, I really, really do appreciate you coming on, not only once, but multiple times. I love speaking with you, and I get a tremendous amount out of your work, even to this day. It's an endless rabbit hole, narcissism. Yeah. It really is. I'll just ask you right off the bat, because I was curious as myself. Do you think are you going to do this for the rest of your life? Is this a lifetime endeavor where you'll never run out of material?
Well, as you know, I have a professional and a private life alongside what I call blog world, Doug. Mm-hmm. And with that, there'll come a point where I will reduce what I do professionally. And then I either decide, do I play lots of golf and start making cathedrals out of matchsticks? Not really the look of a narcissistic psychopath, is it? That,
but so, nobody will know. Nobody knows it's you.
Exactly. Yeah. Maybe I'll just make satanic monuments out of matchsticks instead, and make it more fitting.
That's how everybody envisions you. Yeah.
Indeed, that's right. And, as you know, I'm sat here now with sulfur smouldering around me and minions being tortured with tridents and pitchforks. Will I do this for the rest of my life? There is so much I want to convey to people in terms of my own story, more information about my kind. And at the moment, I'm sort of juxtaposed between people coming to me for help through consultations, of which that's booming. There's so many people want that assistance and are gaining it, alongside the content creation that goes with it. And I look to strike a balance between those two things for people. And of course, there's always stuff being generated by my kind on a day-to-day basis. We only have to look at the enduring series involving Harry's wife, that's the gift that keeps on giving. And then we have Ben Affleck came along and he provides with some material. The Donald will pop up from time to time. Sleepy Joe will do something that might just about merit some commentary on it. We've got Putin flexing his muscles on the border with Ukraine. So there's always that kind of material that can come up, whether it's a pop star, whether it's an influencer, much as I hate that term. So there's all those people to talk about and explain to people. New people come and arrive at the work and need to embrace all of that. So that there's a whole lot more that I need to convey, and I will continue doing. I think the safest way of putting it is I'm not going anywhere else anytime soon.
That's good to hear, because people need your help, my man.
Yeah, they do. They do. And I enjoy the intellectual stimulation that comes from people coming with their problems and addressing them, and of course the extension of my legacy. And I think the next stage really is looking at particularly substantial content creation that I'll engage in, and then embracing particular platforms which will extend my reach. Now, I have had some discussion with venture capitalists to invest in me as a brand, and they're a very embryonic stage. That would enable me, of course, with that basically that marketing clout that they would provide through investment, enable me to really get out there and become far more prominent. And I don't mean I'm well known within the field of narcissism. I mean outside of that. That's where the inroads need to be made. So the lawyers, I noticed on YouTube, there was a lawyer, she commented saying, I listened to all of this to make me more effective as a lawyer to help my clients, which bravo for her. It's that type of thing, to get in amongst all the people who don't know anything about narcissism, rather than go to these supposed relationship experts. So there'd be a huge platform, and there was talk of creating an academy. I think I might have touched on that last time. And there's all of those things. Of course, with that, there comes a potential for the erosion of my control over it. And as you know, control's key to me. So there will be a balance that will need to be struck in that regard. But There's a lot more I want to convey. There's a lot more that I want to explain and explore. And there's always plenty for me to interpret for people.
And thanks for doing that again. And, you know, I was thinking if your work could ever get into the school system, that's where we would need to teach people as youngsters, right? I mean, so much damage would be curtailed if maybe not children, but certainly teenagers could start getting hip to this. And as you say, people that come to you, people like me that have narcissistic, you know, families and cult experiences, we know where to go. But the general population doesn't come across this information probably until it ensnares them, until they're affected by it. They go through 10 years of trauma and trying to figure it out. And also that leads right into the first question I had to you. You know, this is such a the hooks that go in on a person are so deep, and it can change you fundamentally. I speak from personal experience, but anybody that's been through narcissistic abuse will know the challenge and the fundamental change that it can actually give you in everything, your outlook on life, being able to spot evil like never before, etc. So I was wondering, what the heck what makes it so powerful? What are the mechanisms and mechanics that make it such an unique trauma?
I think it's primarily because it's invariably inflicted on people without them knowing what they're dealing with. And it's almost that sensation of being hoodwinked. So I've mentioned elsewhere in my work that you have, there's almost a naivety among certain people where they expect the burglar will be wearing a striped shirt and a mask and a bag marked swag. And the paedophile wears a greasy Mac and he's got long, lank hair and he hangs out at children's playgrounds. I don't think any paedophiles do that. They coach football teams, don't they? And they're scout leaders and they're teachers and they're the neighbor and they're the stepfather and all of those types of things because they blend in. And I think for people that they have this notion really that danger and evil, as it's termed, presents itself in a very obvious way, and it doesn't. And when they find themselves experiencing that, you know, it goes, for instance, when the bespectable gentleman who's never said boo to a goose suddenly axe murders 3 members of his family and shoots a police officer. And you have the neighborhood. Things like that don't happen here. He seems so quiet. They seem such like a nice family. Yeah, because we don't go round smelling of sulfur with horns, you know, running around chasing after people with chainsaws and so forth. And I think for people, it is not only, of course, people suffer the physical injury, they suffer loss of money, some tangible aspects, but I think it is that emotional psychological cost, which is caused by the fact that you engage with someone in an open and honest way. Certainly what I perceive from my victims and those are the people that I talk to, that you engage with a person in an open and honest way, and you thought they were like you, and then you found out that this person wasn't. And to have your trust violated in that way, and also in a sense to feel rather stupid that you didn't see it coming, but nobody does, alongside everything else, that really is the salt that's rubbed into the wound, that you feel, why did I not see it happening? Why did I not pick up on it? And to think, you let this person into your home, you let them meet your children, you introduce them to colleagues, you lent them money, you open. Empathic people invariably, ultimately, end up opening themselves up. And that exposure, and then the way they're treated thereafter, it feels like the ultimate betrayal. And I think that's why it hurts so much. Allied, of course, with the lack of understanding generated by the double whammy of the manipulative behaviors combined with emotional thinking, that people can't make sense of it. I often explain to people that it is that lack of understanding that really cements the hurt. You're walking along a road and let's say, for instance, a man comes up and punches you in the face, Doug, and ow, that hurts, and he's broken your nose or bruised your face. But what will trouble you more after the bruise has faded is, why did he assault me? Who was that man? Why did he pick on me, Doug? But if you had been having an affair with his wife, you'd know, yeah, I know that's him. He's found out about it. Okay, I kind of deserve that. And that's the problem for many victims is, why did it happen to me? What was it about me that caused this person to treat me that way? Why, after the way that I was fair to them and supportive, etc., did they feel that they needed to treat me in this manner? And there is that cognitive dissonance that they really struggle with. The emotional thinking gets hold of that cognitive dissonance and uses it against individuals. And the biggest thing I always explain to people when they come and they are bewildered and they're hurt and it really gets them. Why did this person, HG, who said they loved me and treated me so kindly, was fantastic and interesting, why did it go wrong? So you're looking at it the wrong way around. What you have to say to yourself is the fact that somebody was abusive towards you demonstrated that what came first was not genuine. Because somebody who loves you with emotional empathy will not abuse you. It just doesn't happen. So somebody abuse you, it's like doing those equations in algebra. Change it round and you'll work it out. And you'll be able to see this person systematically would refuse to speak to me, steal my money, cheat on me, walk away from me, perhaps physically assault me. All of those behaviors are abuses. Therefore, what came before it can't be genuine because of that abusive behavior. And when people manage to get that cemented in their minds, it makes a lot of it go away. But prior to that, they're unable to grasp that. And that's what makes it so difficult for them, on top of all of the abuse, the lack of understanding and the feeling of ultimate betrayal.
Man, it's like you can read my mind, because I'm just sitting here going, wow, you're describing me. How is it that you can become, how is it that you become so aware of how this works? And also, how could it, HG, this is what trips me out about you. You're a rare breed of being a self-aware narcissist. That's clear that you understand what you're talking about, because you hit to the core of, like, that. You just explained my life.
Yeah.
With that amount of awareness, I just always would see what you just said before is kind of it's like I had a lack of an imagination for evil. I never thought that, I didn't know that people could be that way, because I can't be that way myself, much as I tried. And it's like you said, being duped on that level and then having to go all the way back and relive it and see how it really worked from the beginning is really, really brutal, because you're just constantly being shocked as to who this person really was that you're dealing with. And it's frightening, and how exactly wouldn't somebody like you with a conscience of exactly how, the psyche works, wouldn't at a level of intelligence tell you, hey, I need to not be like this. Why wouldn't you, rather than other narcissists, maybe be able to actually change?
Because I see no reason to do so, because when people transgress, they must be punished. And I find it entertaining to treat them in the way that I do. When I'm drawing somebody in and they've no idea what I am, that amuses me. Now,
really?
I know people will say that's a twisted, sick sense of humor. Well, that's your perspective on it. But to me, it's about the games are always being played. I get bored very quickly. So I have to have that stimulation of playing the game, of the challenge. That person, identify them. Can I own them? Can I make them mine? And then setting to work on it. And I can do so. And knowing that they are now my possession, that's power. And control. And I always must have that control, and whatever the interaction it is. And essentially, many people, because of the way that I interact with them and I see them, I find them weak, and it disgusts me. And that they walk through life staring at the floor, watching mindless television, wasting their lives. And I've had people say to me, well, they're not harming anybody, so what's the issue? I said, well, the issue is it offends me, because that kind of waste that exists, that the weakness that's exhibited, prompts me to want to punish them for it. And with some individuals, the very fact that they exist in that way offends me, and I want to do something which punishes them for living in that manner. In the same way, I will see other narcissists, and the way that they behave, I think, is odious and pathetic. The very needy mid-rangers. Nothing would delight me more than to take many of them out the back and shoot them, because that's what they deserve. Because they are just these mealy-mouthed, walnut-bulged individuals, but then also there are those who cross me, and if you do that, you threaten my sense of control, and that cannot happen. That's an absolute with me, because of the way that I've been created, that if you do something from my perspective, I don't care if somebody else says, well, from my perspective, that wouldn't be a threat to control. I'm not interested. I understand your view, but it's my perspective that matters because it's me that's dealing with this individual. And in those circumstances, if you threaten my control, you will be dealt with. Now, that doesn't mean that I immediately walk over to somebody and slit their throat, because that's ridiculous. But it might be just as a simple. So, I'll give you an example. Only earlier today, I help all of these people with the provision of lots of free material on my blog, rating comments, YouTube videos and so forth. I also charge for my services because you should do with expertise. Many people recognize that that's appropriate. And there was one particular individual who came along in an email and asked me, how much is it for a consultation with you? So I politely replied and explained it's $150 for 1 hour. I then got an email back saying, that's ridiculous. That's way too much. And you should not be making money out of people's misery. Now, of course, that's immediately a threat to my control. It's challenge fuel. And this dunderhead comes along, and so consequently my response is to write, would you go and say that to a lawyer, to a doctor, to a therapist? I said, go and read the testimonials, and you don't have to use my services. I'm very reasonably priced, and so I nullify that threat to control. Now, I don't know who that person is. It's a name on the internet. But as soon as that comes, I can't let that go in terms of, I can be dismissive. So sometimes when I see comments that attack me, I just laugh to myself, go, well, yeah, you're just an underling, and I dismiss it, and that's the third assertion of control. But I have to deal with it in some way, no matter what it is. And in some instances, where it's someone that poses a much larger threat to my control, they'll have to be disincentivized in a particular way. That might be done physically. It might be done financially. It might be done with regard to their reputation. A tertiary source such as that, they get an email explaining that they're wrong, and it's dealt with, but it still has to be dealt with. They then, of course, came back with something, and of course, it's quite apparent this person was probably of low cognitive function, so they came back with something which didn't make sense, and I said, well, you'll have to excuse me, I have paying clients I must look after, and that's it. More emails came in, I just ignored them, and by ignoring them, that's the assertion of control. But the point remains that individual had to be dealt with, and each and every interaction that I have with somebody, that has to be dealt with in accordance with due to the prior names.
You couldn't just let something go? Like, I get comments and bad stuff all the time, and sometimes it irks me, but I can kind of just ignore it and it doesn't really land. Are you saying that everything lands on a narcissist?
It does. So if somebody writes writes a comment, say on YouTube, and they're wrong in what they're asserting about something I've said, the immediate sort of millisecond response I have is the ignition of fury very quickly to then not to write, I'm going to come and find you, burn down your house and annihilate all your family, but rather, you're wrong, I'm now going to correct you. But immediately, my mind evaluates it as, is it worth me spending my time correcting that particular individual? The way that they present it suggests to me they're not open to reason. Therefore, the easiest thing to do is I just ignore it. Assertion of control by ignoring it. But it's landed for a millisecond and has to be dealt with. Wow. In other instances, I will see this person is labouring under a misapprehension. I can tell by the language that they've used that I could respond in a constructive fashion to correct them, and they're likely then to accept that correction appropriately. So I can go back to them and say, thank you for your comment. You're actually wrong. And then I explain to the point why they are. And then invariably they'll come back, oh, yeah, thanks for pointing that out to me. I appreciate that. I understand that. But again, it has to be just, but again, it's landed each time. It's only a pinprick. And of course, a less evolved narcissist, it affects them to a greater extent because they've not got the skill set to be able to deal with it. So that's why you see certain narcissists who suddenly get into what we call a flame war in a forum with somebody because rather than move on, they've got to back and go back and go back and go back and go back. And they just fire the same thing over and over and over again, and then they'll hurl the ad hominem insults. I don't do that because I'm more professional. And indeed, I'm waiting for them to throw the ad hominem insult towards me, which then signifies, yeah, you've resorted to that, which demonstrates that you don't have any actual cogent intellectual arguments to utilize. Thank you very much. And of course, recognized this with certain individuals like that. you won't be able to get them to change their mind because they're stupid. So what you do is, when I point it out to them, I'm not invariably doing it for them. I'm doing it for the rest of my readers and viewers. So they learn from the exchange, and it's that way. So, because remember, I have to assert control over that individual whilst maintaining control over everybody else that's on the radar at that moment.
Wow.
Because I operate as a facade. So in the same way as I'm talking to you, by answering your questions, I am asserting control over you in a benign manner, but at the same time, I have to have one eye or one ear on the audience that's going to be listening to us. So it's maintaining that control. So if I suddenly had a hissy fit at you, I might, for instance, you asked me something which challenged me, was challenge fuel, Doug. That, and I don't have an issue with that, but let's say you did, and if I was a different type of narcissist, I might deal with it by saying, fuck you, Doug, and ending the call. Now, I've asserted control over you because I insulted you and I've withdrawn from the call. But then what's the collateral consequence of that? I look like a douche canoe. Watching it. So you will never get that with me. So you remember, you sometimes see the politicians on television. I'm not doing this. And they storm off. Piers Morgan walked off Good Morning Britain when he was arguing with, I think, with the weatherman about Harry's wife. And for one such as I, there's always that part of my mind as the triple tracking that's going on is thinking about, what's Doug asking me? What's the next point going to go to? I'm also thinking about, what will the audience be thinking about this? And my mind's also be thinking about something else, which is unrelated to the conversation that you and I are having. And that's because my narcissism has to keep all of those plates spinning at the same time. And I know people who are listening go, oh gosh, that sounds exhausting.
That's exactly what I was going to say, HG. We're back to one of the other interviews. It sounds so exhausting. Plus, you pump out this content, you work your ass off. I'm like, dude, I don't have the time to engage in all the stuff you do. How the heck do you even get everything done and engage in those conversations?
Remember, it is about HG sat in an empty room, doesn't achieve anything. Okay, so because I'm a narcissistic psychopath, I'm the crossbreed of narcissist and psychopath. So I have a need for fuel, but my need for fuel isn't as great as that as a pure narcissist. So I can have longer periods of non-interaction with people. Okay, I don't experience fear. That's my antisocial personality disorder. I have a low boredom threshold. So a pure psychopath doesn't need fuel. But because I'm not a pure psychopath, I do need fuel. But as I mentioned, not as great as that of a pure narcissist. And the point is, I can quite readily sit and do nothing. And if I wanted to, just stare at the firmament as the sun goes down. But that's not achieving anything for me. There's no issue with control because there's nobody on the radar. And I might not need any fuel at that moment. And I might not need any character traits or residual benefits. But I'm wasting that time because I'm not using it for anything. Now, for many people, they say, I just want to sit and relax. I get that. I don't need to do that. I need to be doing. So I either need to be controlling somebody, I need to be creating something, I need to be doing what I'm doing professionally, controlling the intimate partner primary source in my private life, into non-intimate secondary source friends, assimilating information from them, always moving forward, learning more, because I have a huge intellectual curiosity, sitting and reading, picking stuff up off the internet, whatever it might be, you know, something to do with the latest launch into space or someone's sporting prowess, the latest football results, whatever it might be, political tensions and so on and so forth. And I know people think, gosh, you know, that sounds exhausting, but it isn't. That's how I function. So it isn't tiring to me. Yes, I get mentally tired and physically tired by the end of the day. And then I go to sleep my 4 or 5 hours, and then bang, I'm up and at it again the next day, straight out of the box. But I don't sort of flop around doing nothing, lying on the settee, just staring vacantly into space, because that's not achieving anything for me. It's almost like I always have to be sort of swimming, because if I don't, that's it, it's game over.
Is that a regular everyday trait of a narcissist? Because one of the things I've noticed in the ones I've experienced, which I've been a little bit jealous of, is they can accomplish a lot. So is the drive to do that the narcissism? HG, is it this? Is it the lack of such a lack of an inner self, or the true self, I think, as you call it, to keep that monster at bay. Is it the
Yeah,
narcissism that's driving most? I mean,
absolutely. You you have contentment,
mhm.
and I don't. So my kind, we're envious of your contentment. We can't stand
Wow.
it.
Wow, really?
The fact that you yeah, the fact that you could sit on your porch at the end of the day and say today's been a good day in the life of Doug, and
Mhm.
just kick back with a beer and stare at the horizon and feel content in that moment. We can't do that.
You
We
can't do
might
that.
lie. No.
Really?
So we might lie and say that we can in order to fit in, but that would be involving with somebody. So I could sit on the porch with you, and we could both stare at the sun going down and go, "Yeah, this is great, isn't it?" But I'm controlling you. I'm drawing fuel from you, and I'm acquiring the moment to utilize. So there's still something happening. But being on my own, I don't feel that. I feel a sense of achievement. For instance, I can say, I've done X number of consultations today. I achieved this, this, and this in my professional life. So one, I have huge achievements that I get, but there's never any sense of contentment because there's another hill to climb. There's
Wow.
always something that needs to be done to keep the creature at bay, because there is no true that inner self doesn't exist in the way that it does for you. So that's empty and has to be filled. Now, it doesn't cause me a problem. I don't resent being that way. That's what I am, and I recognize that. But what you'll see is with your mid-range narcissists and your lesser narcissists, I explain to people when they think, oh, look, the narcissist, he's gone off into the sunset, he's gone off with that other woman, he's gone on holiday with her and left me in the dirt with debt, etc. I said, listen, the outward appearance is that everything's hunky-dory, but he'll be on that sun lounger, and the narcissism is churning, looking for the next fuel that it's got to get. There'll be that sense of restlessness, or that need to do something. He might lie there and do nothing for 4 hours, but the narcissism will then cause him to have to act. And that's why you'll be sat with a narcissist on holiday, soaking up the sunshine, and then you get needled over something because the narcissist needs to provoke a reaction in you. We can't just enjoy the moment. We're incapable of it.
Wow. That makes so much sense. Every time you talk, I'm having memories of certain events with certain people. Do you, HG, how about, so we've gone in quite a bit of detail about the mechanisms of narcissism in the previous interviews. How about let's swing over to some solutions, because people have left a lot of comments. They want to know kind of like, okay, so what do we do about this? How long does it take to like recognize a narcissist when you're dealing with someone? How do you figure out who, that you're dealing with a narcissist or a normal person? Do you have to
Well,
get captured first a little bit in order to figure it out? Because you can't make a snap judgment, right? Based on one characteristic.
correct. You don't necessarily have to be ensnared in the fullest sense of the word, Doug. What you can do is kind of observe a person from afar. So, for example, let's take a famous individual. So, I've done the series recently about Ben Affleck.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've not had any personal dealings with him, but I poured through a lot of material about his life to reach the conclusions as to what he is. Now, let's say, leaving aside who I am, let's say I was an empath doing that research. I can establish what Ben Affleck is without the danger of being involved with him. So
Mm-hmm.
you can, if you've got sufficient information. Now, of course, most people aren't famous and their lives aren't documented in that way. So the only way you learn about them, of course, is that you get close to them, and
Mm-hmm.
therein lies the risk. So for most people, to find out whether you're dealing with a narcissist, unfortunately for them, means you've got to go in the lion's den and you've got to spend time with them. And remember, of course, many narcissists, mid-range upwards, operate facades. So the person that you see day to day may be completely different in private. So you see that person who's at the office and he's helpful and he speaks well to people, and then he goes home and beats his wife up and calls her a whore, and he's horrible to his children, and highly likely that individual is a narcissist. So you have to look at the behavior over a period of time. The way it is, as I've written about in my books, Red Flag and Black Flag, you can see some of the indicators fairly quickly. And if you err on the side of caution and say, well, I might not know completely whether they're a narcissist, but there's enough there that makes me feel uneasy about it. I'll bail.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with that, because you're operating on the side of caution. And if you think, well, what if that means I lose out on somebody decent? Well, there's 7.8 billion people on the planet. Another one will come along soon, so don't worry about that. You're better off playing safe with it. In terms of how long does it take? Well, I will pick up on whether somebody's a narcissist within a matter of 15, 20 minutes of talking to
Really?
them. Yeah, but I know what I'm looking for very much in the way that they interact with me and the way that they respond. And also, I will, in certain instances, I'll be prodding them a little bit as well to provoke those reactions. For everybody else, you are really looking at, dependent upon the amount of time that you spend together, you'd be looking really at weeks-long interactions before you could really say with certainty. And of course, the risk factor is by that time it's too late. Your emotional thinking's risen, and you're in, and you've fallen in love, or they've become your best mate, or you've taken the job, and that's the hazard. The important thing is that when you become accustomed to identifying the indicators and you've reduced your emotional thinking, that what you can do is, as I mentioned earlier, is play safe and think something not quite odd, I'll distance myself, I'll back off, I'll cool it, or completely remove myself. And that's what you do. So you get it almost like you get a sense and a sniff for it at an earlier juncture, so you don't run the risk. But as you identified, Doug, for most people, you're going to get burned at least once before you start to learn about narcissism. Nobody knows about narcissism without having experienced it in some way.
Wow, good point. I was wondering about that. So nobody's necessarily going to go out of their way and learn it or dive down the narcissistic rabbit hole without being affected by it, right?
Correct. And you can say, of course, of the psychologists and the psychotherapists that have studied narcissism, I think you can say with a degree of legitimacy, if they've never come across a narcissist themselves, they don't really know what they're talking about. Exactly. Because studying it from a textbook is, anybody listening will be nodding now, will be saying, studying it from a textbook is nowhere near what it's like when you've experienced it. They're poles apart. Because exactly. What's written in a textbook is, what's that concept? That's a bit esoteric. Mm-hmm. What does that actually mean? And then when you experience the full visceral effect of the narcissist in your life, that's where you gain your narc wings, if I can describe it as such, from being on the receiving end of it. And I've come across many people in my consultations who say, yeah, I've been to see a professional. They've clearly never been involved with a narcissist because they just don't get it. They know about it from what they've read, but they don't have that fulsome understanding that's required. And for most people to go down the rabbit hole means they have to be personally affected by it.
The best education I ever got in psychology and my own psychology is through getting the shit kicked out of me in Narcissists. If I had just studied about it in a psychology class, it wouldn't have meant shit. My life was on the line, HG, to recover and find out what happened to me in the cult. And I had a forced education. And anybody, like you said, that's been through this will know exactly what we're talking about here, because it's an education like no other. So this makes me wonder, like what I said to you before, like, thank you to the narcissist. Thank you, HG, for the damage, because a narcissist can force growth in a person that would be totally off the radar.
No? The only narcissist you ever thank is me, because and joking apart, because I don't abuse you. I give you the straight answer and allow you to progress. You never give thanks to the narcissist in your life for personal growth, because that's emotional thinking.
Really?
You're still remaining bound to the narcissist. If you think that the narcissist has done you a favor by allowing you to understand more about yourself, scratch that thought immediately. You are the person that's learned more about yourself. They didn't facilitate it. Yeah, the narcissist didn't come along and say, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to abuse you, but it'll make you a better person. He's not a drill instructor at the Marine Corps that's saying, this is for your own good, matey boy. So, and this does happen, that people come and say, well, at least one good thing that's come out of this, HG. And I say, what's that? I can say thank you to the narcissist for allowing me to grow. I said, you can stop that right there. Really? You can fuck that sky high, because that is emotional thinking. And they go, really? I said, yes, because you are thanking an abuser.
Right.
That's not logical. What you've got to say is, thank yourself. Say to yourself, I have the fortitude to get through this.
Well said.
I had the inner resilience to learn more about myself. And so that's part of your no contact regime. You must not allow the narcissist in. As I say, the only narcissist you thank is this one.
That's such a man. That's such great advice. And that's why I love that you have this cold, cool, hard logic, because man, I get caught emotionally and I have been thanking my narcissist, but you're right. I did the work. I'm the one that got myself out of it. And they're the ones that made me. I never actually thought of that, HG. I never got that.
Think about it this way, Doug. Did the cult that you were in, did the cult sit down and think, we'll recruit Doug, and then what we'll do is we'll give him a learning experience that enables.
Right. No, they didn't say that. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. I never freaking thought of that, man, until you said that. I've been carrying that around for years. Jeez, that's why I keep listening to you, man, because it's like layers and layers, and it peels and it peels and it never stops. That's why I asked you if you're going to do this for a lifetime, because you could do the layer. This is what I wanted to ask you, HG. For us that have been wounded, is there an actual healing point? Because I got to tell you, my friend, I think that this wound permanently changed me. It doesn't matter how much self-work you're healing. I'm not obsessed with the self-work you're healing. I feel okay, and I can spot them. You know, I'm not in the same environment, but it so affected me, like we were talking about earlier. These hooks are so deep. I feel like it permanently altered me.
Sure. I explain to people when they talk about the need to heal. Well, I understand the concept of you've suffered a physical injury from the narcissist, so you need to heal. The narcissist exhausted you, so you need to get your sleep pattern and your energy levels back. Or your finances have been completely fucked over, so you need to sort those out. Yeah, that's a kind of healing there. But the idea that you need to heal from something that happened in your past, no. The cake is baked, as I often say. That's who you are. Now, when you've been affected by our kind, which has created the addiction within you, all you need to understand is this is who you are and who you've been made. You can't undo that. Okay? And if you spend your time trying to embrace all of that, all you'll do is become locked in this cycle of navel gazing and not getting on with your life, thinking there's something wrong with you. Right. There is only something wrong with you when we come along.
Right.
So you invariably will, there'll be some individuals, for instance, who might be, you know, they are excessively shy in social situations. Okay, so you can do some work on improving that. But to think that you've got this sort of, I don't know, inner child that somehow has the inner childhood wounds, right. You can't. You're an adult now. The gate is closed on that. And why should you? Why should you change who you are? Do we go around and say to somebody who can't walk and they're in a wheelchair, you need to change who you are, you need to make yourself walk? No, you don't. You accept that that person can't walk. So if an individual has these flaws, that's part of who they are. What you need to recognize is, who is it that will exploit those flaws and use them against me? And most people won't, but my kind will, because our need for control, I sniff that vulnerability in you. Thank you very much. I'm now going to use that against you at the appropriate time. What's that? You were abused as a child. Thank you very much. I'll unlock that away. You're scared of the dark. Thanks for sharing that with me. Oh, what? The Christmas tree once fell over you and you're terrified of trees. Thank you for sharing that. I must remember to push you into the Christmas tree when the tide comes down. Doug, you terrible person. You're laughing at this. Where's your empathy gone? So
you're turning me into a narcissist, HG.
My powers are strong and far-reaching.
I had no idea.
So with that, you've got to recognize that you have those flaws, and with some, yes, you might make some improvements with them. As I say, you know, somebody who's particularly shy, but that's still who you are. And it's us that come along and utilize that. So I explain to empathic people, rather than get hung up on trying to change who you are, I regularly hear and see, oh, HG, I wish I wasn't so much of an empath. Tough you are. Deal with it. And it's only a problem when we come along. So how do you deal with it? get your emotional thinking down, learn the signs of a narcissist, and steer clear.
Yet they still, like you said, it's kind of is it permanent? I mean, is there any way to sort of like have a narc repellent where you, I don't know, get some kind of fortitude, enough knowledge, whatever, as an empathic person where you actually do stop attracting these people? Or is it just a given that these fuckers are going to come into your life because they sniff blood and that's just the way it is?
It's just the way it is. You will always attract us, but the point is, you can do so much to ensure that you know we're coming towards you and that you act on that information. That's key. You'll always draw us like ants to the jam.
Wow.
But the point is that you can ensure that you move the jam away nice and quick because you see the ants coming. You recognize them and you act on it, whereas before you didn't realize what it was, and then people are clouded by emotional thinking that they learn about it, but they don't act upon it. But you will always draw us to ours is a symbiotic relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You're drawn to us because of the addiction. We're drawn to you because your addiction makes you easier to ensnare and keep ensnared, and you cater to the prime aims better than anybody else. So whilst normals and narcissists and narcissistic people can also cater to the prime aims for me, if there was a smorgasbord with the range of people there, I'd choose empath every single time.
Right.
Because they cater to the prime aims more effectively than anybody else.
And you say that it's the fuel, that's the lifeblood of the narcissist, and that's the emotional reaction or that you're feeding off of from the empathic person, and therefore they're more powerful. And that's why. Can I ask you more about that? That's fuel. That's fuel, right? So what is it about? Can you first explain it? Is it the emotional reaction, HG? And if so, what is it about the emotions in particular? Is it some kind of energy like a vampire gets? What is it about that emotional energy?
Well, some people do liken it to an energy vampire. It's not the case that the depletion of your energy then translates into giving me energy. So it's not like, say, like in Dungeons and Dragons, I think it's a wight or a wraith puts their hand on one of the characters, and the lifeblood that they drain out of them automatically goes into the undead character and bolsters them. It's not like that. What it is that your response gives us validation and also signifies that you're under control, where it's pure fuel. And as a consequence of that, it enables us to have a sense of being and purpose, that we matter. Wow. Because the fact is, when we were formed, essentially we were created in an environment where we didn't matter because we didn't have control. And so where your reaction to us tells us that we matter, and that equates to making us feel powerful, so that we don't feel weak or vulnerable. So it's not a direct energy exchange. So it's not sort of almost like a Dementor sucking the life out of Harry Potter. It's more a case of your reaction, which is an emotional one, namely a kind gesture. You make me a cup of tea. You tell me that you love me. You blow me a kiss. You flip the bird at me. You tell me that I'm an arsehole with an angry face. All of those have emotion attached to them of some nature. That signifies that I've impacted upon you. And therefore, because I've impacted on you, I must exist and I must matter. That means I'm important. That means I've got power. That's what it equates to.
So the narcissist exists by way of the empathic person. What if is it, I'm not saying, is it possible to starve the narcissist out of existence?
What you would do is, if you had a situation where you captured a narcissist and took him into the countryside and stuck him in a bunker with no way of communicating with anybody, he would have a fuel crisis and basically go into a catatonic state, suffering psychosis, depression, breakdown. But he wouldn't die. What would happen is he would go into the state of almost like, I don't know if you've watched the Black Mirror series, Doug.
I have.
Okay.
I have.
So do you remember Metalhead, where the dogs were chasing them across the landscape?
I haven't watched it that much. I only watched like 2 episodes.
There's basically, we don't know what's happened, but the actress Maxine Peake is being pursued along with some of her friends across the landscape in Britain, and there are these dog-like robots pursuing them, and she climbs a tree, and her thought process is, I'll keep activating it by moving, so the dog sits up and notices her until the battery runs down. And so similarly, the narcissist gets worn down as the fuel level drops until the narcissist won't function. But as soon as you came along to recharge that dog, away it would go again. It wouldn't be destroyed. So similarly with the narcissist, when somebody comes along and opens up the hatch into that bunker and goes down and starts talking to the narcissist and gives them some fuel, what's that doing? It's recognizing the existence and validating the narcissist. And like those first drops of invigorating water on a plant, it starts to bloom again. And that's what would happen. So you can starve a narcissist. The point is, you shouldn't really go about trying to do that, because we have a fuel matrix. And if you remove yourself from the fuel matrix, that's good. You protect yourself. But what you shouldn't do is go around trying to ensure that nobody else interacts with the narcissist, because then you're putting yourself on our radar and we will fight back against you with adverse consequences for you. And of course, we have so many people that we interact with that you might not know about. So you'd struggle to do it. The only way really that you'd achieve it is, as in my example, you basically kidnap the narcissist and hold them hostage somewhere. Right. And I'm sure there's many people who'd be tempted to do that, but don't try that at home, kids.
I wonder what kind of education, like let's say you could get your work into schools and the population in general really was proofed up against narcissism and knew how to recognize it. I wonder if it could be, if these people, that rise to the top and want to dominate and fuck everybody up, I wonder if that could be starved out, HG, by education.
I think, well, unfortunately, human beings are stupid.
That's true.
We have Florida man, don't we? So the fact is that we tell people, don't push that button. So what do? They push that button,
right?
And don't touch the live wires. You get an electric shock, and some epsilon semi-moron comes along and does it.
It's so true, man. You just described the human race, yeah.
Exactly. So same way, we've had education for hundreds of years, and it still produces idiots.
You're
so
right.
There's going to be a section of society that will never learn, and so they will be fed on by us. But what you would probably have is, if you were able to educate a large section of the populace that were empathic to stay away, that's where it would be interesting, because
really? Wow.
Well, normal people can be ensnared by us, but they either are more difficult to ensnare or they don't stay ensnared for long. So what would happen is, if all the empaths were retreating from us, more or less en masse, then basically all the low-hanging fruit's disappearing. So we'd have to go after harder targets, which would necessitate greater energy expenditure. And what you might then see is that your lower echelon narcissists fall by the wayside, because they are basically ineffective. And if they can't get hold of somebody to breed with, who knows? You might start to breed out the lower levels. It's a hypothesis.
It sounds like a correct hypothesis. That makes a lot of sense, what you just said.
And similarly, you would then end up with a lot of narc on narc action. So that exists. That exists in certain. I mean, take any political environment. Take Congress. Take the House of Commons. There's a lot of narc on narc action that's going.
Yes, there is.
So. And of course, we assert control over one another, and two narcissists, of course, can both get control over one another at the same time, because Narcissist A insults Narcissist B, and Narcissist B sulks. Narcissist A then feels, I've got control unconsciously because I've made him shut up. Narcissist B, in his head, thinks, I'm not talking to him, therefore it's his decision, so he feels like he's got control over Narcissist A. So two narcissists can actually control one another. You might think it's mutually exclusive, but it's not. Narcissists, of course, can give each other fuel, and they can steal character traits from one another, and they can acquire residual benefits. But the problem is, ultimately, with the issue of control, is that it's a tempestuous relationship a lot of the time, particularly amongst the lesser and the mid-range narcissists, with the consequence that you try and assert control and the other narcissist would then retreat, so you'd lose them. So then you'd have to go and get the next narcissist, who after a period of time may well assert control by withdrawal and retreat. So then what does that do? It increases the energy expenditure. And as I think I've explained previously, our narcissism operates on a sort of economy setting, because we don't know in that day precisely when we might be called on to have a real huge energy expenditure. So it's a little bit like if at the start of each day the narcissist is given 100 narcissist points, and the first person they interact with, they can achieve control with using 2 points or 20 points. The narcissism says, well, we'll use 2 points. No point using 20. We need to save them because the next person who comes along might take 11 points. So the narcissism has to operate in that economy setting. And that's why we like the path of least resistance, hence why we go over empaths.
That makes so much sense. Speaking of empaths, HG, so, you know, I was attracted to, or maybe not so much anymore, I'm working on it, but the excitement of the narcissism versus the quote unquote normals. Yeah. So who are we supposed to hang out with? Like, you only like try to find other empathic people? Do you get used to the normals, or do you get sucked back? Obviously, this is the answer, but I would. It's the excitement of the being with the narcissist. At least something stimulating happens, versus hanging out with people like you said that are more in the normal range. I find them freaking boring. So yeah. What's the solution to that?
Well, two things. In part, that's emotional thinking, because there are plenty of empathic and normal people who aren't boring. Your addiction makes you believe that they are, so that you don't hang out with them, and you're attracted to narcissists, because normals and empaths don't feed your addiction. So the addiction says, oh, I don't want you hanging out with them, so color them boring, so you'll seek out the narcissist instead.
Wow.
Lower your emotional thinking, and you'll see through that, and you won't think of them. And also, you'll go the other side of it.
Wow.
Yes, we do present, not all of my kind, but we often are presenting as exciting, fun, full of energy, and so forth. But then when you understand the narcissist and you tackle your emotional thinking, what's exciting about being with somebody that's abusing you?
Right.
And when you start to look at it that way, you think, yeah, I can see, you know, he's got a lot of charm and whatnot, but that pales into insignificance by the fact that he's an out-and-out bastard.
Yeah.
And so when you can see it clearly, it takes away, the shine is lost. And so what people have to do is they have to push down that emotional thinking, lower it through the no contact regime, and staying away from known narcissists as much as you possibly can, so that the emotional thinking can't cause you to keep thinking that normals and empaths are boring. You realize they're not. And you also then think, actually, what I once thought was exciting, it isn't. Because if you look at it logically, it isn't.
You're so right about that. Do you think that, so are you saying when that you get your logic honed down and your emotions kind of, you know, stop being so rattled by the, you know, narcissistic environment, that you will find normals or more chill people like
you will
to be?
You will. With the people that I've worked with, commonly they go, oh, but HG, I don't want a relationship with an empath or normal. Narcissist, they're exciting.
Not an empath. I that's what I empathic people I do like. I was just saying they're so rare though, HG. Like, do you just try to seek out like attracts like, or do you just go for an empath or a normal? I mean, you know,
the key is, you don't go out there looking for the right person. You avoid the wrong people. That's the way to do it. And then you'll find the right people by default, who have the correct interests and exhibit emotional empathy. That's the way that you go about it. The thing is, when you're an empath, who's running around you? Who's clouding you the whole time? Who's creating a cluster around you? It's us. You can't see the empaths and the normals because you're surrounded by us.
Right.
Ooh, an empath, and we all come swarming you.
This is so much insight in an hour. So we're on the hour. I'm going to ask you one more quick question. We have a minute and a half here, and then I'm going to have you tell people where they can get your services. I just wanted to answer this real quick, HG. This subject of fuel, I just wanted to know what it feels like to a narcissist. What is it? What does it feel like?
It's power. It feels like a rush inside. So it depends what the starting point is. So if a narcissist is very low on fuel and has that sort of impending sense of doom, the irritation, then it's like a soothing balm. So it eases the narcissist, and they just start to feel a little bit calmer. And then as more fuel comes, feel emboldened. It's a sort of rushing sensation. And then it gets more, it's almost like fizzing with energy, feeling like you could take anything on. And the more that it comes, you feel like a colossus that could do anything. That you are this behemoth that is striding the world. But it's a sensation of power, an ability to do anything, an ability to achieve anything, and it's intoxicating.
And I could feel the narcissist I was around. I'm thinking of a girlfriend that just would, that would feed off that. And it was almost, I didn't realize it, but it was like something would happen where with me that would upset me or whatever. And then she would become like emboldened, almost like she needed that power to continue existing and to achieve to achieve greatness, you know?
Yeah,
She
absolutely
was very active. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. HG, thank you so much for coming on and for another fascinating conversation. Could you please tell people what you offer? Narcsite.com is where you can avail yourself of the stuff that he has on the website, the Knowledge Vault, etc. But please explain whatever you'd like to say before we end off here.
Certainly. So if you require my help and you want to learn more about narcissism, I have a range of platforms. As Doug has kindly explained, there's my blog, Narcsite, NARCSIT.com, where there are thousands of blog articles and a very good crowd of people that you can interact with. I have a YouTube channel, HG Tudor the Ultra, Knowing the Narcissist, where there are 2,100 videos about a whole range of different topics there also. If you want my bespoke help, you can book consultations with me. You can utilize detectors to ascertain, are you an empath? Are you dealing with a narcissist? You'll find those in the menu bar at narcsite.com. I have a knowledge vault, which is chock full of brilliant and interesting material, telling you all about different aspects of narcissism. So there's a huge depository of information that you can have. And I hope that we are able to speak again in the not too distant future so we can carry on our intriguing and entertaining conversations.
I really, really appreciate it, man. I know the listeners do too. Listeners, if you are at all suffering from narcissistic abuse, or you're wondering, or you're intrigued, this is the guy to go to. He saved hundreds, probably thousands of people's lives. Again, HG, thank you very much for your time. I can't wait to speak to you again. Have a good day.
You too. You're very welcome.
Take care. Let me stop recording.